this week, charges were dropped against Governor Snyder. Just to really dumb it down, because I don't want to get in the weeds. There was a Flint water investigation that started in 2016. That was led by a special prosecutor. Think like Robert Mueller was the special prosecutor for Russia. There was a Robert Mueller, but only covering the Flint, prosecuting the Flint case. The current Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who MSNBC loves, she comes on all the time to fight for democracy and fight Trump. When she came into office in 2019, she fired the special prosecutor. She fired the team that had been investigating for 3 years. The reason she gave didn't make a lot of sense. Based on my sourcing, she fired them for political reasons because they were appointed by her predecessor, a Republican attorney general, and she didn't want that Republican attorney general and his team to get the credit for convictions. So she cleaned house and she restarted from scratch. This is the current attorney general, Dana Nessel. She put in place of the special prosecutor, who, by the way, had charged 15 state and city officials with crimes in 3 years. It's a pretty significant thing. He charged 15 state of Michigan and city of Flint officials with crimes. 2 of them were the highest levels of the health department, were going to trial for involuntary manslaughter. She fired that team. She put in prosecutors who couldn't prosecute their way out of a ham sandwich, who don't have any experience investigating serious financial fraud, which Flint, the dark underbelly of the Flint water crisis, there was a financial scam that led to Flint even using the Flint River. Anyway, she puts them in. They used a one-man grand jury to indict the governor and 7 other defendants. In English, a one-man grand jury just means a judge. So instead of a prosecutor bringing the indictments, she used a one-man grand jury, which is a judge issuing the indictments. Their theory for why they used a one-man grand jury was it would expedite the process. It would make it quicker. Well, the Michigan Supreme Court, just in a 6-0 decision, so not like, 3 Republican judge and 2 Democrats, 6-0. They just ruled that what she did was unconstitutional. And this is why, using a one-man grand jury, they said that a judge can issue subpoenas, can issue search warrants, but cannot himself issue indictments, him or herself. So that's why the charges against Snyder were dropped. Technically, they could refile them under a different process, but I got news for you. We're talking 8 years later. There's statute of limitations for certain crimes in Michigan that have already run out. And also, if you're recharging, that's not going to happen overnight. To recharge them, it's probably going to take 6 months to a year. And then you're going to have witnesses come on the stand 9 years later with memories aren't as sharp, that kind of thing. I don't want to say no. I don't want to say never. I don't want to say it's doubtful that he will be recharged, but I wouldn't bank on it that Snyder is going to be recharged. And by the way, the 7 other defendants who were charged with everything from involuntary manslaughter to extortion to perjury to obstruction of justice. Why this is important, and I would go on a rant, but I'm going to save that for after this next Flint bomb comes out. Walker and I talked about democracy earlier, and do we have a democracy? Well, I don't really know, besides the voting aspect, because I don't think you could call it a democracy. We have an electoral college. The popular vote winner doesn't even win. Put that aside. I don't really know how you could actually have a democracy when the citizenry, in this case 100,000 people, were poisoned by their government, whether it was gross incompetence, which is a very benefit of the doubt version, or they knew and they covered it up, which is what I've reported. Snyder, he was charged, by the way, Walker, with a misdemeanor, willful neglect of duty. My reporting shows the opposite. He wasn't neglecting his duty. He was actively helping to cover up a deadly disease spreading through that water a few weeks before he was up for re-election. Because back then in 2014, he actually wanted to run for president in 2016. This was before Trump. So I don't really know how you could say we have a democracy when the legal system in this country is set up to protect the wealthy. This governor is worth $200 million. He has had an army of attorneys fighting this misdemeanor. Okay? You or me, we'd already be in prison. Okay? Even if you want to say, well, it was just incompetence, whatever. If you're the governor and a city was poisoned and you did nothing for 18 months, and it's not like they didn't know. My reporting has shown, other reporting has shown, they were actively working to stop it from getting out in the national media. They were actively working, telling the residents the water's fine. Don't believe your lying eyes that it's brown. Don't believe the rashes on your arm. This is some sinister, murderous shit. Okay, and then not only after the fact, when it did become a national scandal, there was a secondary cover-up. They cheated on the water testing, which I broke. They manipulated the water testing, and then they declared it over, shut down the water pods that the poisoned majority black, and a lot of poor white people depended on. They needed those water stations. You remember the scenes, lines around the block for water. They shut them down, citing manipulated data. We've talked about COVID, how we don't even know what the real data is because they're hiding it right now. Same shit in Flint. So bottom line, I'm not going to stop covering Flint just because the charges were dropped. I'm going to continue investigating it. To me, the success or failure of Flint is not whether I personally put Rick Snyder in jail. I don't have that power. To me, the success or failure is, do the people of Flint, is someone still fighting to expose the truth, even if it's not going to get them criminal justice?
Look, Jordan, the parallels between what you just described and COVID are,
yes,
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just there's so much similarity between the two crises. We have to do better, people, as a country. This cannot be how we handle crisis, and particular crisis that affects the most vulnerable communities. Sort of, oh, that doesn't matter. It affects them. It doesn't affect me. That can't be how we approach problems.
Correct. And by the way, and this is a big problem I have with people, even in our own independent media circle. I know it's not the sexy thing. I know, and credit Ryan Grimm had me on today on this on The Hill. The Intercept has published my work. People who shit on The Intercept, well, there's not many outlets that have been willing to publish my Flint reporting. Actually, NBC News, an editor, basically told me, hey, we appreciate what you're doing, but this happened so long ago, we don't think the people care. Sorry. That was an editor at NBC News told me. And I said, this was for a story, by the way, that I had documents showing that the governor's top officials erased their phones right before the launch of a Flint criminal investigation. I said to this NBC News editor, Walker, we were speaking on the phone. I wasn't as calm as I am right now. I said to this NBC News editor, let me ask you a question and tell me the truth. If you or NBC News got evidence that Donald Trump's chief of staff or the head of the CDC or the head of, name your agency, but some top officials in the Trump administration, if you found evidence that their phones were erased and all their messages were gone for January, February, and March 2020, before the coronavirus became a global catastrophe, would you think that's a story? And she said, this person literally said this to me, well, that's apples and oranges. I said, why is that apples and oranges?
It's almost, in fact, it's almost a perfect parallel, right? Like,
right.
Media at first, it's a crisis. And oh my gosh, who is responsible? Well, it's the Republican. And okay, now the crisis is, they might have fucked with the testing, but okay, but now the crisis is over and it's old news and people are tired of hearing about it, so we move on. And the crisis continues. People continue to suffer and media completely ignores it and people aren't held accountable. It's a perfect parallel to COVID. It's just,
But bottom line, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to go on a rant just because I try not to be too over the top right before a major story is coming out. But when I break this story, the next nuclear attack's coming, and it's coming from me. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.